Hey everybody, Jerrod Sessler here. It's about as good of a day as it gets if you live in a blue state dominated by communism, especially like Washington State here, where we've been under Democrat rule for 40 years. And it's a good day because yesterday I was in Washington, D.C. Actually, the last few days I traveled through the night last night to get back here to our beautiful state of Washington. But yesterday, President Trump signed an executive order on election integrity. Now, I was actually in DC the last few days meeting with lawmakers because it's vitally important that we codify this executive order into law, as a bill in Congress. And I can tell you without any question that our members of Congress, many of them want to do this. And I know we have a lead member to lead the bill and a bunch of co-sponsors, and it was a tremendous honor for me to be there, to be able to have a tiny bit of an impact on this. I'll tell you that this, to me, is the number one thing that we could do to have a potential to rescue Washington State, and this stands true for many other states that are in similar situations as we are. Now, if you remember, if you look back, it's been over 20 years now since the original Christine Gregoire, Dino Rossi gubernatorial race, where essentially Washington State created the concept of chasing and counting ballots instead of working to win votes. And if you remember back in the day, that race was won by Dino Rossi. There was a recount, he won again. There was a recount, he won again. There was a third recount. They found, I think it was 100 ballots in the trunk of a car in Aberdeen. They counted the ballots and they, declared Christine Gregoire, the Democrat, the winner. And, ever since then, it's been full steam forward with the Democrat Party focusing on ballots instead of votes. This executive order, and I have some notes here, I'm gonna run through it, changes all of that, and it gives us an opportunity here in Washington State. And I'm going to close up with some encouragement at the end in terms of what I think we ought to do next. But for right now, let me run through some of the basics. Let's see. So the big thing is without free and fair elections, we don't live in we don't have liberty. What do we have if we don't have the ability to have free and fair elections and to be able to elect our leaders in a republic, in a representative government? We offer our consent for the government. We elect people to represent us, and we hold them accountable at the ballot box every single year, federally for Congress every 2 years, and then for president or for statewide offices every 4 years. So. Okay, points of this executive order. Number one, elections must be free, fair, honest, and accurate. And they use some examples from some other countries in the executive order of how to do this. I'll just tell you, one of the things that I find unbelievably masterful about the executive orders that are coming out of the Trump administration is how much they use established precedents and established law within their executive orders. They're not just writing like a authoritarian manuscript or something like, hey, this is the way it's going to be. They're actually citing law by law by law, and then saying on top of that, you have to follow this. And by the way, Pam Bondi, DOJ, you have the authority to make sure that this actually happens. And so this is very defensible. It's going to be very difficult. Now, one of the reasons why I was spending so much time on this, because I do believe this is our pathway to rescue the state, but I knew that getting Congress to pass a bill to codify the executive order would make it more indefensible. So it would be more difficult for the crazy people in Olympia to fight what is in this executive order. And so they've done an absolutely great job with it. One of the biggest and most controversial points is one of the first ones here. It's elections must take place on an election day holiday. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Voters must be qualified, legal U.S. citizens. You would think that would be assumed. States must maintain valid, accurate, up-to-date registration voter database. Foreigners cannot register to vote, they cannot vote, and they cannot influence foreign election or federal elections. Shouldn't influence state elections either. This one's interesting and worth diving into. Ballots must be paper without planned automation and must be easily readable to the human eye. State executives and auditors must verify current list, the voter list, as well as future registrants' legal eligibility to vote. This one was primarily targeted at people who are not citizens who might have already registered, and then also having a pathway to validate that future registrants or attempted registrants are actually eligible voters and citizens of this country. This one's going to raise some feathers. Doge engineers will be allowed to audit the voter rolls in every single state, in every single county. And again, there was quite a bit of legal language in terms of the potential punitive results if the states don't support this, and I'll talk about that more in a second. Federal agencies and departments will provide necessary databases to ensure the election integrity. In other words, some of the federal agencies may have databases that would help some of the states and counties to make sure that their voter rolls are accurate. Now, continuing on with some of the points, these points are more accountability, but they're also quite interesting, and they're right there in the executive order. Foreigners who violate federal laws will be prosecuted. State attorneys general are required to ensure compliance and to help federal DOJ or face prosecution. This is a big deal, especially here in Washington, where they're already filing lawsuits because this executive order requires them to not allow illegal invaders, non-citizens, migrants, whatever you want to call them, people who are not citizens. The people in Olympia, some of them, want to allow these people to vote, and they're already filing a lawsuit. At least they've signaled that they're going to file a lawsuit as a result of this executive order. Active duty military are allowed to vote by mail, so that's common. Back when I was in the military, we were able to do that. As an adult here, because of the changes in the laws here in Washington State, I've always voted by mail. Let's see. A couple more here. State executives will be prosecuted and state funding cut if states do not comply. It is right in the executive order. DOJ is instructed to staff up to handle opposition and prosecutions. This is President Trump telling Pam Bondi, you need to staff up because some of these blue states are going to go lawfare on us and they're going to come after us, and you need to have the staff to be able to handle that. And then you may remember under Joe Obama's crazy legacy, he signed an executive order basically directing federal agencies to work on electioneering, registering voters, and things like that. This point, it requires federal agencies that they're not allowed to in any way participate in electioneering or voter registration drives or anything like that, which is appropriate. They should not. Now, the big question is with this one of the first points is that elections will take place on the Election Day holiday. And that's the only point that I'm actually going to read some of it for you because, again, this is just masterful stuff. It's really amazing. There's a couple of problems. So like in Washington State, I think there's a law on the state books that says that the ballots have to be mailed, I think it's 18 days before the election. I think they can mail them a little bit before that. For those of you who don't know, the counties are actually responsible for this. So they print and mail the voter pamphlets because they're all unique. And then the counties are responsible for printing and mailing their own ballots as well. And I'm not sure what kind of internal gyrations go on or whether or not the state has approved vendors for that or how that works, but there is that rule. So the question is can a state like Washington State continue to mail out ballots, potentially 3 weeks ahead of the election day if it is an election day holiday? The question is, because the executive order text does not say you cannot mail ballots. It quotes multiple different precedents and laws. So the first one is it quotes two different federal law under the election law, where it essentially requires the votes to be cast on a single day, and that's it's 2 USC 7 and 3 USC 1, and that's dictating a national federal holiday for elections. Now, the other thing that the states could do, this would be functionally difficult and possibly incredibly tumultuous for voting. The states could divide the federal elections and state elections. And I'm actually open to Washington State doing that, because I think they would actually end up sinking themselves, because it would be so easy to compare the data between the two. You see one election actually has integrity, and you compare those numbers to the state election, which maybe they do the way they've always done it or the way they've done it the last 20 years, and you can easily see the difference. Obviously, my goal is to see us rescue our state. I want to see the election have integrity. If Washington State is forced to comply with this in 2028, we have an opportunity to win some statewide races. I guarantee it, because we have illegitimate elections today, and they need to be fixed. And there's nothing in this what's amazing is this is all existing law. So it'll really help us. So anyway, it goes on. The sentence here there's two sentences essentially I want to point out in this point about the election day holiday. It says, "It is the policy of my administration," this is President Trump speaking, "it is the policy of my administration to enforce those statutes and to require the votes to be cast and received by election day established in law." Now, here's the word that bothers me about that sentence. And again, I'm not questioning them. I'm just saying I would have loved to have seen the word to or on instead of by. So it says votes be cast and received by the election day established by law. I would have rather seen it say votes to be cast and received on the election day established by law. So in other words, you go to the polls, they print you show your ID, you print your ballot, you do your ballot in the same room. Your ballot stays in that room. The people that count the ballots are in that room. Your ballot never leaves that room. There's obvious chain of custody control with that. There's nobody coming and printing a bunch of ballots and getting them put into the system. It's just better. So I don't know why that is, but again, I think it's clear that under this one, they are absolutely tying themselves to existing law. That 2 USC 7 and 3 USC 1, which essentially dictates the date with which the election will happen. It happens on a Tuesday in November, and that if you go and read those statutes, it says exactly when it is. Then this continues on. It says there was a court case in the Fifth Circuit recently. It was the RNC versus Wetzel in 2024, and the statutes set the day by which ballots must be cast by voters and received by state officials. Again, the day. It is pointing to a specific day. And then President Trump goes on to say in this order, it says, "Yet numerous states fail to comply with these laws by counting ballots received after Election Day." This is like allowing persons who arrive 3 days late, 3 days after election, perhaps after a winner has been decided, etc. So it's very, very pointed that they don't want ballots to be counted after the election day. They don't want them to be accepted or received or anything like that. Not quite as clear as I would like to see it in terms of whether or not they're going to allow them to print and mail ballots weeks in advance, because I still think that is a big part of our problem here in this state. But it seems clear that it's an election day, it's a holiday, that's the day that you go and vote. So should we be excited here in Washington? I think we should be very excited. The caution that I would have is, as conservatives and as Republicans and as people who love life more than we love politics. When we have positive things that happen like this, a lot of times we end up focusing or sort of moving to, hey, what's going on in my personal life? I need to work on that and focus on my business or different things, and we sort of forget about what's going on in politics. Now, let me just tell you, this step of getting this executive order and getting a bill passed through Congress, which is going to happen. Again, I just spent a few days in Washington, D.C. meeting with congressmen back there, and it's going to happen. They're going to codify this executive order into law. And so the problem is for us is, we ought to be excited because we now have a pathway. We didn't have a pathway before. We were subject, just as we've been subject for the last couple decades with regards to lack of election integrity, to kind of whatever we could get. And so now we have a pathway. Now we need to make sure that these things actually happen. We need to make sure that we look at, okay, now we can give some hope to the voters in Washington state, and we can motivate people to get registered to vote, hopefully people that love our state and love our country and want to see liberty reign here in America, and especially here in our state of Washington. So it's not time to sit down is what I'm saying. I mean, I'm super jacked up and super excited that we have this, but now the work begins in earnest. Now we know that the work that we have to do in front of us isn't in vain. People call me all the time. I got a call literally as I was boarding the plane yesterday from a lady who was rather frantic about what was going on in our state. It's like, well, we just tried this and we're doing this and it's not working. It's like, yeah, because that's not going to work right now. We can fight, kick at the goads all we want at some of these things that we think make sense. But we're fighting against people who can't figure out what gender they are, that think that boys should be able to play in girls' sports, and they think that foreigners should be able to vote in our elections. And so we have to be more strategic, and getting this executive order, getting the bill that's coming was the next step. Now beyond that, we need to take the reins and make sure every single person that is eligible and thinks like we do gets registered here in Washington state, and we need to take every advantage of this. And I think if we do that, we can start winning and we can absolutely rescue Washington. So thank you, and God bless you.